All right. Hello. Welcome to the Your Coach podcast. This is a super special episode, as you can maybe tell by the super professional microphones. We are in beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with Michael Doyle. Hello, Michael.
Hello, John.
So, Michael and I have podcasted before, and Michael is all the guests on the podcast are people in my circle, people that I coach with professionals that I work with. Michael is kind of like my running Yoda.
Oh,
He
I'm short, 1,000 years old and green. Yes.
he's not, he's not my coach. We've run together. We've run together on the Habit Trail Relay team before. Um, I've worked for him as he was the editor when I wrote some stuff for Canadian Running Magazine. But he's just the person that I go to kind of for the truth, the real deal about running. If
Okay.
I have a question or something and I just want to you know, get a vibe check of like, does this make sense? So that's why he's here. You're going to hear a lot about his thoughts and views on running. Um, and sort of his place in the running world because he's kind of an important guy in the running world. But behind the scenes, though, you wouldn't know it, but well, there's a lot. So that's Michael, and you'll get to know him right now.
Get ready
So
for the truth bombs.
exactly,
You're putting the pressure on me now. I was like, okay, so no lying on this podcast.
there's no lying.
Okay.
So the first question that I asked to everyone is, how did you get into running? Why is running in your life?
It's a complicated question. I think it's a complicated question for everybody. And I have both the simple sort of like boilerplate answer, which is a very common path to running, which is, you discover that you're mortal in your early adulthood and you want to fix that to a degree. And then the more complex one is just like my own personal relationship to sport, to what I want out of my life, to whether or not I want to be a challenged person. And so I ran, very kind of in a at a very mediocre level when I was a kid in grade school and also in high school. And then I took a break. I
Mhm.
went and I lived in Montreal. I lived the good life for a
Yeah.
while, and I went to Concordia, so where you work now and you've coached, and also are a alumnus as well. And Concordia back in the day before you came along did not have any athletics programming, so I had a good excuse not to run in college, even though I probably wouldn't have been like a scoring cross country teammate or anything like that. And then I sort of discovered road running, distance running really as like a 25-year-old. Just kind of living a shitty lifestyle and kind of wanting to change that and get control of things. And I just started running. I started doing like a really stupid approach at first, which is 5 days a week. I went out and I would run at night at like 10 o'clock at night. I go out from my apartment at like Notre Dame and Guy or whatever, and I would just like pound out a 10K as hard as I could along the canal pathway at like 10 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. Which like after about a month, I was like starting to, fall apart. And I was like, okay, I remember there being like structure to training to a certain degree when I was a kid, and I was always like involved in organized sports. I was a swimmer for my entire childhood at a fairly high level, so I knew that there was more to training than just trying to kill yourself in a 10K. So what I did was I started to try to figure that out, and that was tough because that was around 2005 when it's like pre-social media,
Mhm.
internet. Like I actually stumbled upon Let's Run like
Mhm.
very early days and discovered a book called Advanced Marathoning by Pete Fitzinger and Scott Douglas,
Yeah.
which is kind of like a classic tome now of marathon training. It's a certain sort of approach, and read that thing back and forth many times. Did not run a marathon for a few years, but sort of thought about it for a long time before I dipped my toes into that world. So that's the long-winded genesis. That's the actually kind of one version of the story.
Mhm.
You want me to tell you the other version?
Yeah, what's the other version?
Okay, so the other version is I'm a kid. I'm like grade 8. I'm running cross country in Halifax for my middle school. Um, it's not my primary sport. I'm like doing it as like land training or whatever because I'm more of a swimmer, and running's really fucking hard. And cross country is really, really fucking hard. And I'm in Point Pleasant Park. And so
Mhm.
if you've ever done any running in Halifax, you've encountered Point Pleasant Park probably. There's a couple of nasty hills in there. And the cross course had a really tough hill. And I gave up on myself on that hill.
Hmm.
And I backed off and I talked afterwards about like a hamstring or a calf or whatever. Cause I kind of like hobbled in mostly I just beat myself in the
Yeah.
course. And that stayed with me for, well, all the way until I was 25. And
Mhm.
I thought about that from time to time for like a lot of my young adult life as like, it was like a secret I
Mhm.
kept with myself that like I gave up on myself.
Had you ever given up on yourself like in a swim race?
No, no. See, that was a weird thing is that like, I think maybe because I was like, I started swimming for a swim team when I was 5 years old and like practice every day, sometimes 2 a days,
Mhm.
and I was just much more confident and comfortable with swimming. And then team sports, the truth of the matter with team sports is, and one of the reasons why team sports is really great for kids is that like the pressure is off you to a degree individually
Yeah.
because you got to share the ball or the puck or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And also also the responsibility and the blame.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas with individual sports, it's much more challenging. But I think I was much more well equipped in the swimming world and also had kind of gone through like wins and losses. Cause like I swim for like 5 events and every like Saturday at a swim meet, I had 5 shots at,
Mhm.
trying to prove something to myself. And I sort of saw it more as like practice for the next one, which I think is a really good attitude to have in sports. But with running, it was a little different.
Mhm.
And yeah, that stayed with me for a long time. And then I kind of revisited that. And I think actually it's the reason why I found my way to running the marathon is because uh, the marathon is sort of the ultimate philosophical and physical challenge. And I wanted to kind of like, I
Well, you
basically
did.
wanted to right a wrong and like, sort of like end a uh, personal stain and lie that I that I had my own personal shame from middle school. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and the marathon is very much that the battle of whether you give up on yourself or not. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, not all it is, but that's the psychological part really is
Hmm.
like, do I believe that I can keep going? The writing says I should be able to, but it doesn't really seem like I can. But I'm going to keep going anyway, and then you kind of get there. It's also very different from swimming, like you described. Swimming is, 5 races, every weekend. With marathon, you kind of get, one or two shots a year, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe that can be our first kind of running, I don't know, training type question is like, what are your thoughts on if you're racing a marathon? How many marathons should you do in a year?
Oh, we're getting real here.
Yeah.
We're going
People want to know this. This is an
yeah.
important question.
I mean, I have very strong opinions about this stuff and I won't hold back.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, I think you should do one a season and that's it. And that there's only 2 marathon seasons in the year. I mean,
Mhm.
you can kind of like slice and dice those seasons any way you want. Maybe you want to run a Houston in January, but then like trying to like shove in a spring marathon after that is super dangerous. You might be able to get away with it when you're young and you're relatively new to distance running into the marathon, but over time that will come to haunt you. So I'm a big believer in just like spring race, fall race. And even then, like this is just life catching up to me and having a small child and other things going on is like I even just do one a year now. And I focus the spring season is more on kind of like some other stuff that I want to do. Just finished, coming back from the Cabot Trail Relay, which you mentioned before, which for me is a really personally an important event and something I like to do well at. So
Mhm.
that becomes like a big focus, even maybe more so than,
Mhm.
a half-assed marathon effort or whatever. I don't like a half-assed effort with a marathon. So
Right.
Yeah. So it's spring, fall, 2 marathons a year. You do
Okay.
3, you're starting to act clowny. You do 4, I'm not interested in anymore. You do 6, you don't know
Six.
what you're doing. You do
Six.
10, you're just being like you're showing off. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely not 6 or 10. I think,
No.
yeah, I think one or two. So would you, I mean, so you've said that more as a result of circumstance, you've kind of dropped down to one. Do you see that there's any benefit in sort of taking a marathon season off once in a while and racing, 5K, 10K or whatever?
Yeah.
Or because I think, when you talk about 2 a year, like it sounds like you think that people should be very committed to the marathon and like, kind of doing it over and over again.
Well, the marathon's it's an ascetic quest. It's like joining like a it's like joining the convent or or where do the monks live? What's a I would keep wanting to say monkery, but that's not a word.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no. The marathon is a really demanding thing. It's really, really hard on your body. It's hard on your mind. It's hard emotionally. I mean, the letdown of a less than successful marathon is really devastating, in part because you only get one shot a season at it, which
Mhm.
means like you probably only get like 20 really good shots at it in your life when you think about it. I mean, like you can run, I hope to run until I'm can't walk, barely walk anymore, but
Yeah.
to run like at your apex, you get
Right.
about, let's say, a 10-ish year window, right? Depending
Mm.
on when you enter the sport. But yeah, I think taking a break, I think you just kind of like you don't have to be a dyed in the wool marathoner like I'm describing. You don't have to be somebody who's just like this committed member of some sort of like the cult of the distance.
Mm.
You can come and go with it. And in fact, it's probably a healthier, more balanced runner by doing that.
Mm.
Hit the track for a summer and see if you can build up some leg speed. I mean, these things are important, right? Especially if you're looking to improve. So, um, 5s and 10Ks, I'd much rather run a marathon than train and run a really hard 5K because
Really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I see. I'm the opposite. I'm for sure never running a marathon again. I've run two and I did it.
Yeah.
It's fine. But it's not. I would say that's partly, maybe mostly because of like circumstance in my lifestyle. Like yeah, I don't think that my family would support me training a marathon because I know what is required. Like, I guess if I mean, not that I'm currently running a lot, but if I were healthy and running, I could get away with running a marathon, but I don't think the marathon is something that you want to get away with. You
No.
need to, because it won't be fun
Yeah,
that
I've
way.
tried that and the last 10K of a marathon that you haven't fully like really gone all in with,
Yeah.
just it turns into this really devastating experience that takes a lot of mental fortitude to even just get through. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, so what do you think that people need to do then to run fast distance running generally and marathon specifically?
Okay, so yeah, this is one of the questions you sent me in advance. So I've been ruminating over this one for a couple of days. I think, and maybe I'm just preaching to the choir here, but like get fast is a relative term, right?
Mhm.
If you mean get fast at like long distance running, like the marathon, the half, and you know, things get a little different with the 10K and the 5K, and certainly a lot different on the track. Um, but let's stay in like the marathon realm for
Mhm.
now. I think ironically or sort of somewhat idiosyncratically, in order to get fast in some respects, it's probably better to slow down and run a lot more. And so
Okay.
I know it's like probably you're like, yes, tell
Tell
can
me
you
more.
contact a few of my athletes I coach and just say that to them. But yeah, I've experimented a lot over the years. I one of the sort of privileges of sort of existing within the running media space and the running industry for so long is you just talk to a lot of smart people, a lot of people who've tried a lot of different things, a lot of Olympians, a lot of people who have a lot of talent that maybe didn't make the Olympics but did a lot of interesting things and maximize their own ability level. And I think the one constant that I just keep coming back to over and over again, and it's also the thing that like like Runner's World and the like, and my old shop I used to work at, you're constantly trying to tell people like, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
There's corners we can cut. There's tips and tricks. There's ways you can do this without having to like put in a lot of work. And the
Yeah.
truth is you got to put in a lot of work. You probably need to run more, whatever you're running, which I know sounds like a dangerous thing, but in order to make it less dangerous, you need to run more and run probably slower than you're running as well. Like, I think a real key for me is getting volume in, a lot of volume in to build up a huge aerobic capacity. And then also obviously running the workouts hard, but not impossible. And then, finally just sort of focusing on all these little things and building in and layering in, like doing strides on a regular basis. Like stupid little things that if you get lazy, you just let them slide, but like 10-second hill sprints,
Mhm.
10-second-ish strides.
Mhm.
Just doing a bunch of those on easy days. Don't hurt yourself, but those build in and incredible running economy over time. And that layered with running every single day and doing nice chunky long runs and then backing off on running those easy paces not easy because you're getting emotional when you're running,
Mhm.
or you're bored.
Mhm.
uh like being really disciplined in that regard, it's hard, but it pays off over time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, that so some people hear that message, and this is, I'm always sort of, I don't know, feel misunderstood or typecast as like, big mileage coach, which,
Yeah.
yeah, I am in that, like, you should run more, but that's all it is. But it's not that that's all it is. It's just that the other things are enhanced by that. Like if you're running, 50K a week and then it's like you've got, a race coming up, so you got to start doing workouts like that, you can do that and you'll improve and run, better in the race than you were before. But if you build up a bigger base before you start doing those workouts, then the workouts themselves are going to be better and faster. And you're going to be able to handle harder workouts, not because you're pushing yourself harder, but because your level of like strong hard, not comfortably hard, but like, like running a good hard workout without breaking yourself is going to be higher. Or your ability to just run a hard workout and not break yourself.
Yeah.
I think that to me, like, no one that I've coached ever has been injured because they ran too much, full stop. They got injured because they ran too much too fast,
Yeah.
like easy runs not easy, or too much too soon. So like they went from,
Yeah.
running 50K to trying to run 120K like in a week. Like, yeah, that's a little foolish. Like you have to be reasonable and build up like a little bit, the next step, the next step. Um, so yeah, like the mileage is, kind of the foundation of it. But then as you say, there's all these other little things, and people tend to, I think, get caught on one pole or the other. And, you get people that just, do like mega mileage and like, I don't know, 120 is not that much, but like 150, but depends on your level, for like a recreational athlete who has a family at home and stuff like that, like 150K is a lot.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you have to can count for being tired and all that sort of stuff. For a pro athlete, like that's the right amount. If you're a professional and you have people to help you recover and things, like sure. But then the rest of it just sort of will fall into place. And then the other pole is like you were saying, the cut corners kind of like, oh well, but if I eat beets and
Yeah.
and beets and sodium bicarbonate, and if
Yeah.
I,
Buy the like
you know,
weird like inflatable boots and like,
yeah,
yeah, all
yeah.
yeah,
Or if I just
hit physio a
do,
lot and
if
whatever.
I
Yeah.
just do a lot of kettlebell swings, which like I love kettlebell swings, like strength work is important, but that's
Yes.
not going to replace the volume of running that you need to do to be a good runner.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
All right, I need to bring on more people that I disagree with so we can have a more robust
I can
conversation.
try to disagree with you as much as possible. Although you're a frustratingly like reasonable person. I try to challenge you from time to time with a take or two, and you're like, actually, Michael, like I see it this way. It's like, God damn you. It's like the ex-lawyer in you.
That's no fun.
Yeah.
So okay, so on the sort of the flip side of the same question, what are some of the best lessons you've learned in your years of running? Which is kind of another way of saying, like, tell us about some spectacular mistakes that you've made.
Spectacular mistakes. I mean, I made a lot of them. I've tried trial and error. I think lessons learned. I mean, the first one is particularly with like big race running. The a major marathon as an
Mhm.
example. A major marathon is a big marathon race is a very different thing than your local marathon or a local 5K or 10K certainly.
Mhm.
And so this is one thing. It's like when you're going into a different environment for the very first time, you're gonna do as much mental preparation as you can, but also accept the fact that it's going to be a very different experience and maybe give a little bit more, and
Mm.
especially in the first part of a race,
Mm.
because because it's not just about,
You say give a little bit more.
as an
You,
example,
you
like
don't mean run faster.
no, I mean run slower.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean back off. I
Mm.
mean just trust that that
Long race.
it's a long race.
Hmm.
Even a shorter race is still going to be a lot longer than you want to give it, right?
Hmm.
And I say this because in my second marathon in Chicago in 2010, I think, that fall of 2010, I had a spectacular fuck up. I was running for a number. I
Mm.
was very confident, cocky, it probably would be the term. I just felt like I really had everything sort of sorted out because the first one came pretty easily.
Mhm.
And that was in part because I think I had a very like conservative goal and I was very careful about it. And I had a lot of like healthy respect and fear for the marathon going into the first one because
Mhm.
you've never run one before. And like I bought into this whole idea of like you don't run the distance in practice. So I had
Mhm.
never run a marathon before I ran my first marathon,
Which is pretty
which is
normal. Yeah.
totally normal
Yeah.
and a really good idea.
Yeah.
But, going into it, I'm sure this is a common thing you get from very new runners that you coach. They're like, but why can't I just go out and run one for practice just so I
Mm.
know?
Mhm.
And the thing is that it's not the same thing, even if you were to do that, I've come to realize. So first marathon went quite well. I was very confident and happy coming out of it. And then it became about like really specific goal setting. It became about external motivators like times. And then you go from something like the shitty little Mississauga marathon
Mhm.
to what is like, well,
Okay.
um, to the big, bad, grand Chicago marathon with,
Mhm.
40,000 of your closest friends running with you. And it's a very different experience. And I was not prepared for just the emotional, psychological drain of like the whole weekend,
Mhm.
of the getting to the start line, of the corral system,
Mhm.
of the waiting,
Mhm.
of running next to several hundred people that are as good or better than you. And all of these things you don't I guess you don't think about in advance
Mhm.
unless you've got somebody who's really experienced who's sharing this with you, or unless you're watching a
Podcast.
podcast that's telling you that right now. And so that was a big takeaway for me. And just being patient with races and letting the race kind of come to you a little bit. It's
Mhm.
something I've found myself saying to people that I have like a bond with in running over the years that I've like raced with, that I'm like have a partnership with my wife, like my training partners, my friends that I run with. It's like just let the race come to you,
Mhm.
just take your time. It's even a 5K, you've
Mhm.
got some tiny wiggle room to work with here. You
Mhm.
have to get your body and your mind to be on side before you're going to attack something as challenging as a distance running event. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm meandering now. I don't even know if I've answered your question,
No,
but
that's a good lesson, I think, that people don't think about because they get real excited about, ooh, I'm gonna run Boston, I'm gonna
yeah,
run Chicago, I'm gonna run New York.
yeah,
And you can see that as an opportunity to run fast because, like, as you say, you're like, oh, there's like 50, people or hundreds of people running under 3 hours or something, right?
yeah.
And so, like, oh, it's like it's going to be easy. Well, it's never going to be easy. So, but I think you can turn it into that. Like, I think you can turn it into an opportunity, and have it be good. Like, Mel, when Mel ran Chicago, um, she just kind of let herself go with the flow of the race. And I remember very specifically seeing her at halfway, and the split was like way faster than we kind of thought. And I kind of looked at her and I was like, "You good?" And she's like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Okay."
It's always so
And
risky because in the first half of a marathon, it's like, it
you can
should
do
feel
it. You
good,
can
even
do
if it's,
anything. Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
can go a lot faster. But that was, I mean, a bit different. She was in the sort of elite group, so she got to have breakfast with her coach and in the room and hang out at with all the people, and they're nice. They take you where you need to
yeah,
go and all this stuff. So it's a bit of a different experience, but I think it was still for her like this big race, but she took advantage of the fact that like her trying to run whatever she ran there 2:34 or something like that was that there were lots of people for her to run that with. She didn't have to think about it too much. She just kind of was racing.
yeah. Somebody who's probably really well prepared and also just kind of embracing that there's like your body doesn't know what 234 pace is, what
No.
whatever that is, 330 something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Per kilometer. Your body doesn't know what that pace is. And actually that pace, the physiological and also psychological, emotional experience of that pace varies. And it can vary quite wildly, even when
Yeah,
you're at the same fitness
sure.
on a day-to-day basis. I
Yeah.
mean, you hear of this sort of like this sort of like mystifying phenomenon of somebody just being like, I just wasn't on today. And
Hmm.
that can sometimes be an excuse
Right.
and an excuse that I kind of deplore.
Well, that's because that's
Uh,
the grade 8 Michael Doyle,
that's it. That's it. That's
just
exactly what that
quitting
is.
quitting on yourself and
Yeah,
coming up with an excuse.
that's exactly it. I mean, we can get
This
it.
is
The
why this is why you
Strava.
hate that so much.
Yes, I
This is
do.
why you hate the just wasn't my day.
Because it's bullshit. Because it's never just wasn't my day. And the
Yeah.
anytime you see somebody with a Strava post from their race that's like more than just like, happy with the effort,
Yeah.
it's excuses and it's lies, is what it is. I'm sorry, that's what it is. So just don't write it, like be honest with yourself and with other people. Anyway, I'm not going to excoriate people on Strava any more than that. But yeah, no, your body doesn't understand what that pace is. It's just systems, right?
Yeah.
And then your brain is reacting to that feedback, and in a very kind of like highly subjective and also very protective way as well.
Mhm.
Because distance running by its very nature, I mean, you can train up to be able to do quite incredible things, but it's still ultimately, and this is kind of why the marathon's a fascinating project, is like, and really any distance events project is you're just trying to get as close to 100% of what you can like squeeze out of your body and also like trick it into doing
Mhm.
on any day without crossing that line and paying the
Mhm.
price, right? So,
Yeah.
and that is a sliding scale, even on a day-to-day basis, even with the same fitness, all things considered. So yeah, and in Mel's case, I guess she stayed within that kind of like I like to talk about like windows or
Mhm.
buckets or
Yeah.
sort of like frameworks of pacing and like I mean I know like I'm walking around the term zone,
Yeah.
but like because
That's
zone
so.
two is so trendy these days, but like it's a zone. You're
Yeah.
trying to like stay within a zone.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important zone it's a good concept
Yeah.
because that's what it is. It's a range, it's a zone. It's not like you have to run exactly like, 4:12 per kilometer or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's going to be around there, and a marathon is a long race. There's going to be turns, there's going to be hills, and like your pace is not going to be exactly, the same the whole way. Um, and it's really good advice for training too, because yeah, like some days maybe like not your day for training. And by that I mean, you slept weird, or you ate something weird, or you didn't eat what you wanted to eat or something, or just your mind is somewhere else. And all of these things are, they're costing you energy. And then you go and try to run fast, and you've depleted your energy resources for that day,
Yeah.
your emotional and sort of creative energies. And so you can't run the pace. You're still running the effort though. So that's why I say
Yeah.
to
Your
people
heart
like
rate is
it's
probably even
okay.
higher than it normally was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's okay to have a bad workout as long as the effort is there, and and you're kind of still in the same range. Like obviously there's reasons to, stop a workout or something if you're injured or whatever, but it's okay because you're still stressing your body, and actually all this external stress actually means that you can stress your body less with the running stuff and still kind of get to the level of stress that you need to make it, respond and build back up stronger, which is sort of the whole point of training.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like the internal and external motivators, but also internal and external indicators.
Mhm.
I mean, if you can just, especially if you're a very A-type person, you can be very obsessed with numbers, right? And very driven to hit those numbers. And if you feel like you don't hit those numbers, you're not succeeding or you're not building on your fitness or whatever.
Yeah.
But as something as a another sort of another thing I've definitely learned and incorporated in my running over the last, certainly over the last 5 or 6 years, especially as I'm aging,
Mm.
um, and that I'm running with a group of people typically where I'm not the best runner.
Mhm.
So I'm not leading the way, and it's not a big ego flex every time I do a workout.
Mm.
And particularly in the summertime, I'm really bad in the heat. So for much of the summer, I suffer.
Mm.
So one of the things I've tried to incorporate into what I do when I work out or when I'm doing a long run is when things are not going well, which is usually there's some version of things not going well in any run for me.
Yeah.
When one of those things is not going well, I actually try to consciously practice working through it.
Mhm.
A common one would be, say you've got a training partner that you're very close in paces with, and they're just sort of like coming into fitness a little bit quicker than you are,
Mhm.
and they're pulling away from you in a workout, and they're kind of dropping you,
Mhm.
and things can go like very elastic, right? And
Mhm.
the band snaps very easily, and you go
Mhm.
backwards pretty
Mhm.
fast. Working against that because that's such a common experience in racing,
Mhm.
and any common experience for all of us, like recreational runners, like if you run
Mhm.
in an organized way with a group of people, if you get competitive, you're running with people that you run with often, you kind of challenge each other a little bit, which is healthy. But then if it's not going really well, how do you how do you like, I was talking to like a grade 6 kid I coached at my elementary school this morning, my kid's elementary school. I was talking about this exact same thing. I was talking about team sports, and I was
Mhm.
talking about how why are the best coaches in team sports and football and hockey and soccer or whatever? Why are the best coaches considered the best coaches? It's often because they make what's called in-game adjustments, right?
Mm.
They're good at sort of evaluating what's happening in real time, taking a look honestly at what they have in front of them in terms of like
Mhm.
their talent pool, like the plays that they've got lined up, and then making changes and sort of like not abandoning the plan,
Mhm.
but like altering things intelligently on the fly.
Mhm.
And you're your own coach, or
Yeah.
you're your own coach kind of ultimately when you're out there running. And to be able to be honest with yourself and be like, I'm bagged. I'm falling apart here. I can't hit this pace
Mhm.
that I normally can hit. My training partner, who I'm very competitive with, is dropping me.
Mhm.
What do I do? Then you have to make an in-game adjustment.
Yeah.
You have to try to turn it into a positive, and you have to try to um, also accept the fact that, as you just said, your body doesn't know the pace, and all your body knows is like stress and adaptation. So if you're stressing in the right way, you're going to gain that adaptation, and then figure out a way to hold on to that pace, to not give up.
Mhm.
That's a really good thing to practice, right? Is like
Yeah.
don't fall apart.
Yeah.
Um,
So in practice, it makes sense to, make these adjustments and maybe, I mean, it's obviously situational, but, maybe you're sort of forced to dial it back a little bit so you can complete the workout.
yeah,
Um, but if you're in a race, like at what point does that, I guess, if you're being honest, it doesn't matter, but at what point does that turn into an excuse where like, you're like, well, I have to make an adjustment. I guess I should slow down today versus, okay, like this isn't feeling good, but I can't slow down because I have a goal and I'm going to achieve it.
yeah. I mean that's a very, very difficult thing to sort out. And it's very difficult to be honest with yourself, especially when you're feeling an incredible amount of
Mm.
physical stress. And I would say it's also different depending on the distance as well. Like the
Mm.
marathon, I'm always telling myself in a marathon, like just buy yourself some time and try to create an opportunity for things to improve
Mm.
and for you to hang on, because it's always super disappointing and devastating when you cross the finish line and you've given up on yourself a little bit, and then you're just like,
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
It
No,
was,
I find, like every race I've ever run in my life, as soon as I cross the line, I know if it was a good race or a bad race.
yeah,
Before I even see the clock or whatever, like you
yeah,
just know.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, people need to, tap into that sort of self-knowledge and honesty and just, kind of trust yourself a little bit. I
yeah.
think sometimes it's because people don't trust themselves enough to be able to make that decision. Maybe sometimes because depending on the situation they're in, like sometimes the coach is making all the decisions for them. So I'm mentoring a coach, and we were having our meeting and talking, and she was saying how she was at a training camp, and so she was there with athletes of a bunch of other coaches.
Okay.
And the way she coaches is she tries to, we're talking like sort of high school aged kids. She tends to try to give the kids autonomy and to give them little things to do so that they take ownership of the thing. And so she had this group of top steeplechase kids in Quebec or something.
Okay.
And she was like, okay, so what I want you to do now is just pick a couple steeple drills and go do them. I'm going to work with this group and then I'll come see you. And they were like, hmm? Like they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And she's really good. She figured it out right away. She's like, "Do you want me to tell you what drills to do?" And they're like, "Yes, please." And she was like, "Okay." Like she did because they're not sort of, her primary athletes and she was needed to get them to go do something.
Yeah.
But I think that's a situation where, and not to, it's not like necessarily that the coaches of those athletes are not good coaches, but the way that they've set up the way they do things is very like, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And the athlete just relies on that
Mm.
instead of being able to, because eventually, like, whatever, whether it's a high school track race or the Boston Marathon, when you're out there running, it's just you. Your coach isn't there.
No,
And maybe the coach is yelling from the sidelines, but like,
that's a blur.
you
Yeah.
don't really hear what's going on. I mean, so yeah, it's really important to develop that sort of relationship with yourself to know, what you can and can't do and how to get to it. And yeah, like practicing, I think probably that's a rare thing. People don't think of that in practice. If things are
Yeah.
going bad in practice, to think about like, okay, how can I imagine like this is gonna, how can I turn this into a positive? How can I imagine this is, if this happens to me in a race, what am I gonna do?
I mean, that's the like I I don't know when this dawned on me, but at some point a while ago, and I was like, this is kind of the only opportunity that I really want to practice any of this stuff, and I give myself a lot of opportunities because I don't fail a lot of practice, but I like, we all have our ups and downs in practice. It's
Mhm.
very rare that you're like, I mean, it's a glorious thing when you're, mid to late season fitness, you're coming into form and you just like crush a big workout and you're
Mhm.
like, that felt almost easy. And in
Mhm.
fact, I would say that in those moments, those are actually your worst workouts because that means you've adapted and
Yeah.
you've adapted and you're not creating you're probably not stressing your body
Mhm.
to a point where you're actually going to get a big adaptation from that workout. It's just a
Mhm.
really big confidence builder. And
Yeah.
that's an important
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle. But
Yeah.
it ironically, the 2 weeks before when you were just like absolutely like falling apart,
Yeah.
that was probably the good workout.
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure. And it's also like I often get a little worried when that happens in a workout for someone I'm coaching too close to the big race
yeah,
because they just nail it and you're like, ooh, okay, good,
yeah,
but ooh, like I was just talking to an athlete this morning and we were talking about how the big workout that she did right before her marathon was like like she said she felt so good and she was running at, supposed to be like a steady pace and she was running like 15 seconds per K too fast.
greedy.
And it's
Yeah,
just like, and it's not that I don't think that in this case it was she did that and burnt herself out and then was too tired for the race. I don't think it was
right.
that. That can definitely happen
Sure.
when people do this, like,
It happens at all levels.
like to run a like a,
Yeah,
try to run a marathon in practice or something because you're like, oh, I felt so good. And then
yeah,
I could put on Strava that I did like a, whatever marathon. It's like,
yeah.
probably not good. But like in this case, I think it was just that kind of made her think that that was the right pace to do in the race when
Right.
in fact in a workout and in the marathon like we were just talking about like the first half or first 25, 30K like you can run faster than you're running. That's not it's not hard to run faster, but it's just you're not gonna be able to do the last 10K. And so you can do workouts with the marathon where you can do all your marathon workouts faster than you're supposed to. And you might not notice and you'll be able to do well with them. But then that won't prepare you for what you're supposed to do in the race. And that can be, that can, make you think that you're somewhere where you're not.
And that sort of touches upon another thing that I, as you were talking there, I was like, oh yeah, something else I guess I've sort of learned, which is to, especially when you're doing marathon training, but this applies to all distance running, but it's particularly marathon training. I've come to realize over the years that like you cannot get emotional about much of your running. And what I mean by that is you go out on a Tuesday, you're 6 weeks into training, you've done a couple of longer long runs. So you've got a little bit of fatigue built up in your legs. You're starting to struggle a little bit with the motivation. Mileage is ramping up a bit. It's not yet sort of snapping into place, so you don't feel awesome yet. And you're out there on a Tuesday and you're dragging your ass through a 10-mile run just because it's like on the plan
Mhm.
and it's important to do.
Mhm.
The danger at that is for some, and this also happens when you're feeling pretty good and fit and everything's light at that point too, you can start to get emotional about that run. It's an
Mhm.
easy run. The
Mhm.
purpose of that run is
Mhm.
to just put in the volume, put in the work, get the run done,
Mhm.
stay easy,
Yeah.
recover. And instead, maybe you pop the AirPods in, you
Mhm.
put the playlist on.
Mhm.
You're like, I can't do this without
Mhm.
getting emotionally engaged with this run.
Mhm.
And then you go out and like, little like tempo kind
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
helped you get into the run and get you sort of like more emotionally involved in the run. And then all of a sudden the run became more enjoyable to do.
Mhm.
And that's fine in the moment.
Mhm.
But you start accumulating too much of that, you've missed the purpose of what you're trying to do. You've
Mhm.
become emotional about your running, or you're like worried about like paces. Like a
Yeah.
classic scenario is like, particularly for a recreational runner of a certain ability level, they're like this number, like 5 minutes a kilometer on an
Yeah.
easy day. I can't
Mhm.
run more than 5 minutes a kilometer or
Yeah.
I'm a failure or
Yeah.
4:30 or
Yeah.
whatever. And they start getting obsessed with making sure that their watch says this at the end,
Yeah.
or they want to feel really good because
Mhm.
otherwise it felt boring or I
Mhm.
felt tired. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Running
that's,
is boring and
yeah,
running is tiring.
yeah, yeah,
That's it. And I kind of try to say the opposite. It's like, okay, no faster than this on an
yeah,
easy run. That's your limit, but slower if possible.
yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you run 5 or 5:15, that's like whatever, like at a certain point. But then if you start going faster, then you're not recovering and you're not like you can
And
it's
it's a death by a thousand cuts
that's it. It's
scenario.
the same thing as the early parts of the marathon. You can do that,
Yeah.
but just because you can doesn't mean that you should. You can run lots of easy runs, faster than whatever the pace is supposed to be. But just because you can do that doesn't mean you should. And that means if you do that, then you're going to start to go into workouts tired, and then you're going to have bad workouts. Then you're going to get emotional about that, and then you're going to try to do too much, and
And
then
then
you're
you're
going to
going
get
to get
injured.
injured.
Yeah,
And you're going to be like,
what
I don't
happened?
know what
Yeah, I
happened.
don't know what
I'll
happened.
tell you what happened.
Yeah.
You ran that Tuesday run in 4:15 a K pace just because you were bored of running 5 minutes a kilometer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you've got a lot of experience, a lot to share with people, and so you've kind of channeled this into a kind of career in the running media.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? Like how did you become sort of the like I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like Don Cherry of running?
Holy
No.
fuck.
No. No, because you're not an op-ed guy. Like you don't usually put
No,
your takes out
and I
there.
don't like cry when some kid from Sudbury like hip checks some Finnish guy or whatever. No. No, that's an uncomfortable top. Yeah, what would a better analogy be? What would I prefer than that? Like, yeah, no, yeah. I got other sports. There's all these sort of like, somebody I really like is like Bill Simmons, for example, like a guy who
Okay.
talks about basketball a lot, who never played at a high level, but knows a lot about the sport and has become sort of like a real sort of like student and professorial kind of like
Yeah.
member of the media when talking about basketball in particular, but and gambling, which I'm not interested in. But yeah, so why do I do this? And how did I find myself in the place I'm in? Yeah, it's kind of like the analogy would be like running into a burning building to find a home. Yeah, why did I enter into journalism and media at the time that I did? I had a really nice, burgeoning career in tech.
I remember one of the first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but one of the first times we met was in a van at the Cabochon Relay,
Yeah,
and you were sitting there with your laptop doing some, computer stuff.
I was
And
working on like large language modeling in 2009 or 10.
like
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
computer stuff.
Yeah.
This is not the direction our podcast is going to go now, but
No, I can nerd out about like AI because
yeah.
that's sort of what we were working
But
on a
but
long
that
time
you
ago.
were doing
Yeah.
that, and I asked you, and you're like, yeah, this is my job, whatever. And then, not like the next day, but like kind of next thing you know, it's like, oh, Michael Doyle is like doing this like editor thing. So what happened there?
Um, I think it's one of these scenarios where like, hobbies can be intoxicating.
Mm,
And I had two hobbies. One was this fascination with distance running and the marathon that I had developed at that stage in my like mid to late 20s. And then the other was writing and
mm,
journalism. And I wrote for the school paper at Concordia. And it was just something I always liked to do. And I had been freelancing a little bit, writing about various things,
mm,
culture. And I mean, in many ways, I was much more interested in like uh, writing critically about the cinema
mm,
or literature than I was about running. But I
mm,
was writing about running as well a little bit and freelancing a bit on the side, just purely for fun, as one does
mm,
with running, right? Similar kind of comp there. And I became sort of more and more involved, and I became involved in the sort of technical side of things as well, just because I knew a lot about what was then an unknown concept, which is social media. Because
mm,
an early project I worked on at this startup that I was working for was on a small company called Twitter,
mm,
and trying to like build semantic search properties into the back end of Twitter. And so I was like, you know what, like Facebook, Twitter, this stuff is going to be uh, a really important aspect of the sort of architecture of the internet. And
indeed.
like magazines or yeah. Yeah. And magazines like physical print media is something that is definitely on the wane. And I became fascinated by sort of like helping build out the website, and also contributing to the magazine as well because I liked
Mm,
writing sort of longer form stuff
mm,
as a challenge, like narrative sort of storytelling, nonfiction storytelling. And then the role became available, and I decided to like fucking throw my life away and do it. Um, all that said, like I think now I look back on it and I'm where I am now, and I think I resisted it for a little while as like, like this is, I don't want to just be the running guy, and we all contain multitudes though, John.
mm,
So I'm not just the running guy, but I put in like where we were 2014, I put in like almost 15 years into
mm,
this career, and I guess I know a lot about the industry and this weird sport that we do, and the fact that it's like a lifestyle pastime quasi religion for a lot of people.
yeah.
It's just something you come to know a lot about. And like, I hate to admit it, but I kind of love it. It's a fun puzzle to think
Why do you
about.
hate to admit it?
Ah, because I don't know, you're just like, you want to do different things with your life. And yeah, I guess it's like you have to accept who you are at a certain point. And I've accepted that a big part of who I am is somebody who has worked in running for a long time and knows it pretty well. And I just kind of love the day to day of it. So I'm not fighting that anymore.
So
You know?
tell us a bit briefly about
Mhm.
the current venture, Marathon Handbook.
Right.
Plug away.
So yeah. Okay. I'll plug away. It's like one of the things I'm really terrible at is like self-promotion. But yeah, so I thought I was kind of done with really being deeply involved in running media. And then at the end of 2023, I Alex Hutchison, the uh, world's
Mhm.
leading sports science journalist, and
Mhm.
also a really nice guy and a
Yeah.
friend. Um, he connected me with Amby Burfoot, who is like a former Runner's World
Yeah.
editor and that 67 Boston Marathon winner, who was kind of this like editor emeritus at this website I had never heard of,
Mhm.
but apparently was like maybe the second biggest by traffic website in the world dedicated to running, called marathonhandbook.com. And I was very skeptical at first because I was like, I don't want to get back involved in running in a
Mhm.
significant way. And I've never heard of this site before.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
Turns out the people behind it, Sky Thomas, who owns the company, Scottish guy in his late 30s who is very, very smart, lives in Madrid. His wife's Spanish. He has a life in Madrid, a few kids. He's an awesome guy. He just sort of like built this little mini empire. He started it in 2016 as a personal blog
Mhm.
and kind of figured out SEO,
Mhm.
and then really figured out SEO. And then during the pandemic, kind of like quadrupled down on it as a project.
Mhm.
He's an engineer by trade. So he's kind of got that brain.
Mhm.
And it's like, he was like, okay, this is like a challenge and a puzzle. And like, there's like a system I need to put in place. And he figured it all out in a really profound way. He used a lot of very sophisticated tools that I'd always kind of wanted to play with. Um, and built up something like pretty great and pretty special. His only issue was that like a ton of his traffic was through search, and
Mhm.
not much of it was like kind of organic or endemic traffic through like the running community.
Mhm.
And his problem was like the problem that I encountered questioning it. It was like, I've never heard of this thing before. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool runner. Why have
Yeah.
I never heard of this thing before? And but yeah, I went to Spain in January and sat across the table for each other for a few days and talked about life and the direction of this thing and his vision for it. And it totally
Mhm.
aligned with what I'd always kind of thought a running site and a running media property should do.
Mhm.
And so we're doing it.
Mhm.
And it's been amazing. And we've done a lot of really cool things in a very short amount of time. We've got a really good newsletter that's like got like 160 something thousand people subscribe to it. And
Almost as
uh,
much as my newsletter.
there you go. Exactly. Exactly. And it takes time to build.
Yeah.
And started a podcast because I'm passionate about podcasting and I really believe in it, even though I know it's like watered down space as we're talking in podcasting, but it's
Mhm.
in a tough grind, a tough uphill grind, but I
Mhm.
think it's worth it. And we're doing all kinds of other stuff. We're covering stuff live. We're like making a big effort to do things in a really kind of robust, more substantial way than I'm seeing elsewhere. I know that
Mhm.
like Sidious is like for the tracky nerd and they
Mhm.
do their thing and they do it really well. It's really specific. Runner's World is the sort of the grand dam of running media. And they
Mhm.
just, I don't think they really do anything well at this stage. Like they're sort
Mhm.
of just dragging their feet and hiding behind a garden wall and collecting a little bit of money. I mean, it's like, I know it sounds mean to say, but they do some things pretty well, but
Yeah.
like they don't have to do,
Right.
they don't have to be nimble. They don't have to be aggressive. Uh, got some friends that are running the Run, which is the outside running platform now. Outside
Okay.
Magazine's got and they're doing some cool stuff. And like kudos to them. And if you don't follow what they do because it's great and they're
Is
great
that
people.
and Hutch is involved in outside too? He writes for them,
Yeah,
is
he's
it? Or is
he's a
he?
columnist for Outside. Yeah, yeah. He's not directly involved in that, but his columns I think find their way onto that platform. But
Mhm.
they're doing some interesting things. But apart from that, I mean, Let's Run is the glorious. It's like what is Let's Run? Let's Run is like the kids whose parents in the 90s just told them be home for dinner by 7 and they're just like everyone's running around lighting shit on fire. But there's something amazing about that too, but it's also kind of can be toxic and awful. But like I love Let's Run, but Let's Run doesn't connect with everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're trying to fill a void that I think kind of exists in a very significant way in running right
Mhm.
now, and we'll see how it goes, but we're I'm making I think a pretty extraordinary effort right now. So yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Do we have time for one more question?
we have time for as many more questions.
All right.
Eventually, my 5-year-old will show up, or six. He's six now. My 6-year-old will show up here for his piano lesson and like the end of the day, and that will make for a really interesting finale to this podcast.
All right.
But we
Well,
can get it
let's.
done before then. Yeah.
Well, so I just have one more question. I want you to tell me what are your top three running books? This is
Oh
something
my God,
you
this
and
is tough.
you and I talk about books all the time
Yeah,
and
yeah,
running all the time,
yeah.
and so running books. And then I'll give you my top three if they don't match up, which I don't think they will. I think one of them might, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, as you know, I love literature, and I'm like a book collector too, which is it's a dangerous habit. There is a troubling hobby,
Yeah,
collecting first editions of books.
more
But
expensive than being a runner.
yes, and although running is can be pricier than you think, that New York City Marathon ain't getting any cheaper.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so running literature is a complicated one. It's actually something that I've often thought about as like a neat like summer podcast series or some sort of like, like a dedicated 10-part like thing
Yeah.
and a newsletter or whatever to like go into like the best running books, like to create kind of like the Hall of Fame or
Or,
the
or throw away last question on a podcast.
or throwaway last question on a podcast. And so I have complicated feelings about what's often considered, and I know it's probably your sentimental favorite, like what's often considered like the greatest running novel of all time, Once a Runner by John L. Parker, right?
Yeah, that's on
Um,
my list. That's yeah.
yeah. I read that book at the wrong time. I was too old. I was in like,
Mm.
I read that book in my mid-20s when I was just sort of like sucking up everything running. And that kind of came across the radar. And I actually read it as it was not had
Is
not
it?
been republished yet. It had
Oh,
not been reissued yet. So the only copies that existed were sort of like being passed around
yeah.
in circulation. And someone gave me a photocopy
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah.
the book, and I had like this stack of photocopies of the pages, and I read the book as a photocopy print, which is weird.
Yeah.
Um, but that book, like if I read that in high school, man, like if I read that in high school, I'd be doing that crazy, what is it, however many 400s you
Yeah,
did or
yeah.
whatever. I'd be doing that workout when I was 17 and killing myself doing it. But I can sort of see the flaws in that book, although I can forgive them because I don't think you have to sort of evaluate a book as like, what was the intention of the book and what was the context in which the book was written.
Yeah.
Um, so I wouldn't put that up there as a number one book. What I think what I talk about when I talk whatever the play on the Raymond Carver short stories, the Murakami book,
Oh, I talk about when I
I
talk
talk
about
about
running.
running.
Okay.
I don't think that's actually a very good running book. That's like, I know people are going to be like, what? I think that like there's some interesting ideas in there. I personally find Murakami really hit and miss, and I kind of feel that book's a bit of a miss in some.
I
That's my like hot take
I
about
agree
running
with you
books.
there. I didn't think that book was that great, and I was kind of
No, it's
excited because I
yeah,
had recently been kind of into Murakami, read a couple things, and then I was like, "Ooh, running book," and then I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
it's not that
yeah.
good."
It's a bit of a disappointment, I think. I think it's because the idea of the book is so enticing. It's like you want to read a well-written, sort of philosophical nonfiction memoir musing about distance running, right?
Mhm.
From someone who's also a really good writer.
Yeah.
But that's not it. I think here's a weird pull. There is a book. What is the book called? I have it upstairs. I should have prepped for this, but it was made into a film, which led me to the book. It's an Austrian book. It's a very small novel.
Hmm.
And the film, which was an Austrian adaptation that came out about maybe 10 years ago called Der Robber or The Robber.
Oh, okay. I've heard of
I
that.
maybe have like pumped this book before. And it's written, the novel version is written by, the original novel is written by an little known Austrian author named Martin Prinz, Prinz.
Okay.
You can find a translation in paperback as I
Uh-huh.
did and order it from like
Uh-huh.
um,
Is the
the
book called
UK.
The Robber also?
I don't think it is. It's
Okay.
called something else. But anyway, the the book is about a bank robber who a guy who is a like a very high level marathon runner. Like we're talking like imagine if maybe not quite Trevor Hoffbauer or Ben Preisner or whatever, but like,
Mhm.
imagine like a national class
Mhm.
runner someone who's maybe in the two teens or
Hmm.
210
Yeah.
runner, is obsessed with distance running, is a very solitary figure, and then also, in order to make ends meet, just starts like robbing
Robbing a bank.
banks.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but what that book does and what the film does, and I recommend people watch the film as well. It's tricky to find, but if you can find it, it's a great watch. Is it really kind of encapsulates the loneliness of the long distance runner,
Mm, mm,
to play on another book and a bit of a cliche as a concept, but it really unpacks that in a really interesting way, and it
mm,
explores a dark element of distance running that I
mm.
think you're into it and you're like this far into a podcast about this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
you probably know what I'm talking about.
Mm,
Like there's this like obsessive, intense quality to it, right? It's a self-destructive quality
yeah.
that you have to be very careful about.
Yeah.
And this book explores that and touches upon something about the distance runner that I seldom encountered in any other
Mm,
media, period. And I think that we're all kind of a bit scared to talk about because it's not like
mm.
fucking sunshine and lollipops with running all the time. Um, it's going to get you the hard E rating with this one. But yeah, so that book I would recommend. I think it's like it's just never talked about. I don't know if
Mm,
anyone's read it. But I thought that that was like a pretty interesting one.
mm.
Yeah, what are the other ones that always get thrown about? Like Duel in the Sun, about I don't know if that book's been canceled because of it's about
Yeah, Salazar. But
Salazar, but yeah.
I'm thinking like, fiction.
Yeah.
So I'll give you mine.
Yeah, please do, because
So
I'm
once
struggling.
a runner for sure, and I
Mhm.
think I think once a runner has that too. Like to me, once a runner is the ultimate runner fantasy. It's a fantasy
Mhm.
book, right? It's
Yeah.
like if you could drop everything and just run, like that's what you would do, right? And that's
Yeah.
that's sort of the fantasy, which is and
Well,
that's
like
what
Running with the Buffaloes, all the
yeah.
nonfiction has
Mhm.
that fantastical element of it, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like Goucher and like Magnolia Hill
Mhm.
and just being, being with that Colorado team in the 90s. I mean, there's a lot of like sadness in that book too, but
Mhm.
like that kind of encapsulates that, even though I
Yeah.
don't think it's like very well written, it's still like very sort of
Mhm.
enchanting fantasy. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other one is more of a short story. You
Oh,
know what I'm gonna say?
Al,
Alex McLeod.
Alec
Yeah.
McLeod.
Miracle Mile.
That is the single best. You're right. That is the single best piece of fiction about running that I
And
have
and
ever
and,
encountered.
and the
You're right.
best part
You're
about
right.
it is that it's essentially like Canadian because Alex is Canadian
Yep.
and his dad is Alistair McLeod. So it's sort of like what you'd want out of the Murakami in sort of a generation removed. If you like Alistair McLeod, not everybody likes Alistair McLeod, but
I mean,
known as a
No
great
Great
Canadian
Mischief
writer.
is a good book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so it's about the two track runners, two 1500 runners, and kind of one who's like on his way up and one is on his way out, and they're just kind of crossing paths. And to me, the scene that always, and this is just because I lived, I don't know, the life of track and field on the road, like the scene in the hotel where they're
Yeah.
sitting in, you got to sit in a hotel all day before you race
Yeah.
and
There's
that's
like
just
waiting. Yeah.
it's like caged animals. And that I love that, and I also love the train scene where they race the train out of the tunnel at Windsor
Yeah.
because that's really freaking cool. I don't know if that's something that actually happened or not, but that would be
I'm
awesome if it
sure it's
did.
based on some sort of
Yeah.
folklore or actual real event that
Mhm.
McLeod encountered.
Yeah.
I I think I did like a fanboy thing with him years ago, and I had a back and forth with him a little bit over the years, and I at one point emailed him and was just like, "That your book is
Oh, yeah.
your short
Yeah.
story is like
He's
the
a
best."
he's a friend of a friend. So I have a good friend Harold, who was a runner, high school runner in Toronto and Scarborough in the 80s. Like he ran decent. Like he ran like an eight, I think he said like an 8:30 or
Yeah.
8:43K,
Okay.
And but I just knew him through the writing scene in Montreal. He's a teacher at John Abbott College
Okay.
and he likes to run and he just keeps his running. And I remember I met him for a run on Mount Royal with another friend of mine, Peter Cardle. Peter Cardle had like won nationals cross, like made national teams, had run, I think, 28 something for 10K.
Right.
And so the three, and this was later, so he wasn't that good then. And the three of us met up and he told me after, he's like, I didn't think Harold was gonna make it because Harold's just a big old lumbering dude. But he can run and he ran with us. So anyway, but Harold is friends with Alex from their McGill days. They both went to McGill, I guess, at the same time or something like that. So Anyway, maybe we'll have to get Alex McLeod on the podcast at some point.
I would love to pick
Um,
his brain about that short story. That's
yeah.
so that's from a collection. I think it's called Light Lifting, if I'm not
Like,
mistaken.
yeah, yeah.
It was
I have a special kind of one-off edition of the Miracle Mile though, the light
oh
chapbook edition.
oh really? Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool. As a
yeah,
collector, that just
yeah,
sort of like my
yeah.
brain just went afire. I was like, I have to have that. Because you were
So,
right. That is, I didn't realize. So this was a bit of a trick question then. Because I
oh,
didn't realize I was thinking novels, books, I was thinking full, like the full
mm,
meal. In terms of like that's as a short story, that's like that is the most complete, and it touches upon what I was saying, talking about earlier with the robber, with like
mm,
it connects with something deep,
mm,
profound, and not necessarily like uplifting and positive
mm,
about running
mm,
and about the sort of like the existential battle and crisis and sort of like the a real kind of like
mm,
Hegelian experience that
mm.
you have as a runner. And not to get too like nerdy, but yeah, that's the one. That's
Yeah,
the no one else has touched that.
yeah.
That
So
is the pinnacle. You're
the
right.
other one that I really like, and I don't know if you've ever read this one, it's kind of rare. I had a copy and then I lost it or gave it away, and I can't seem to find it. It's called Emerald Underground by
No,
Michael Collins. And
no. Okay, you were talking about Michael Collins a couple months ago, but yeah, I've never read it.
it's about an Irish kid who gets a scholarship to a US college to run.
Mhm.
And then I forget, it's been so long since I read of it. Something happens and he's essentially thrown out into living in the Ozarks by himself because he's like thrown out of school or something. And there's some
He,
crime that
like
happens or
gets
whatever.
booted out of Arkansas or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So he's living there, and the, the sort of the culminating scene is, and this is one of those fantastical things, is he's challenged the local high school team to a 5 mile race where he will race 5 miles and they will race 5 by 1 mile.
Okay.
So if you think about that for a
Bit of
minute,
a
like
flex.
there's
Yeah.
no way that that should, I mean, maybe if you get a
Really
mediocre high
shitty
school
high school
team
team and he's
and
just
he's
super
pretty
fit.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
That's
that,
an interesting like
yeah,
math equation to figure out. Like
yeah.
how good do you have to be to beat and how bad does the high school team have to be?
Yeah. Like if they're running like all running 5 minute miles and you're pretty good, if you're good enough to get a US scholarship, like yeah,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
probably. But anyway, I that one again, it's the same element, like the rawness of it, and like just like at a certain point, it's like running is all he has because he's lost his scholarship and he's on the run, and but he's getting out every day to like run from his like whatever tin pan shack or whatever he is. I don't know. So that one is one of my favorites, and I it's like one of the few books that I
Because
really like that I don't have.
there's a real dearth of like really good running literature, really, especially running, especially fiction that heavily incorporates running and the themes of running, and sort of the themes that that kind of bubble up to the surface when you think about running in a bigger way. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll have to put that on my list. Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, I think it's time for the piano lesson, or soon.
It is time for my child to show up. Speaking of kids, people who are interested in running,
But have other things to
but
do.
have thankfully have other things to focus on as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for this. Thanks for also all the fancy gear and hosting this in your home. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I just hope this all works out well. I guess we're all gonna find out by this point. Yeah.
That's it. All right. Thanks.